Hey guys, what's up? How's it going? Thank you for tuning in. This video, I'll be reviewing the Coleco Atom computer line. I have two versions in front of me. These boxes are huge. They're so big, I couldn't even get into the shot of the picture here. That's how big these things are, and they're heavy. To my left, to your right, is the complete box set of the Atom computer. I picked this up several years back, and it comes with the printer. It's a daisy wheel printer. It's different than the dot matrix printers that many of us were used to in the 1980s during this time. And I'll explain more about that here in a second. It comes with two controllers, has some games. It has, of course, a system. It can play cassette tapes as well as it plays cartridges. So this is like an all-encompassing computer. Out of the box, you hook it up to your TV. So there is no monitor. You actually use your TV for a monitor. And when this thing came out initially, it retailed for $725 US. Now with inflation, that's a lot, even today dollars, but with inflation back in 1983, that's over $1,700. So you can imagine that was a really hefty price tag. You put that in comparison with other systems. During the time, of course, it was a very saturated computer market. In the early 80s, you had Apple with the Apple II line of computers. IBM had their computer. The IBM, I believe, retailed for around $670. The Commodore 64 retailed for only $200. However, both the IBM as well as the Commodore 64 didn't come with the add-ons, didn't come with a printer, didn't come with a lot of the accessories. So when you start adding those things, it came out to be about the same price. So I think Commodore was pretty smart in their strategy. They released things in small bits. So you had just the system itself for $200, and if you wanted a printer, you had all that. Now Coleco made some really boneheaded decisions when making the Atom, and I find it interesting. This is kind of a random fact, but the Coleco stands for the Connecticut Leather Company. For those who didn't know, it's been around since the early 1900s. So it's been around for a while. They started off making leather, and what's also kind of ironic is Tandy, who also made computers in the 80s, started off as a leather company as well. So it's kind of weird that both leather companies started off making leather and worked to make computers. This is the first dive into the computer market for Coleco. They had released the ColecoVision a year prior in 1982. That was a huge success. They sold over 2 million systems worldwide in Europe and in Canada and in the US, among other countries. And it was a big success for Coleco. Coleco also had a huge successful toy line. They're best known probably for their Cabbage Patch line of dolls, but they also had the really cool tabletop arcade line that they had. So they had a lot of going for them. They had a lot of money. They announced in 1983 at the Consumer Electronics Show that they were working on a computer. And they said by the end of the year, by the 1983, by the end of the year, they're going to ship out 500,000 units, or 500,000 units, right? By the time December came around, there were still no units shipped. It was supposed to come out in October. Eventually, December hit before Christmas, and they had shipped out 95,000 of these things. And they initially said it was going to only cost $525, which is still a lot, but they upped the price tag $200, and by the time it came out, it was $725. Now, this version's less expensive. I don't know how much this expansion module 3 costs, but it is a lot more rare because not as many were sold. No one really knows how many Atom's computers sold at the end of the day. 2 years later, the thing was discontinued. Coleco had lost tens of millions of dollars on this thing, and pretty much, unfortunately, had to shut its doors. The video game crash certainly didn't help in 1983. People were not interested in this product, mainly because of price tag and some really boneheaded decisions they made. And I'll dive into more about that in a second. So I'm going to do an unboxing over each of these units, show you the differences between the two, but really they're essentially the same thing. The only difference is this takes a ColecoVision to play. You need it's an attachment add-on, where this is just out of the box, is a straight up Atom computer. And why do they call it the Atom? You're probably wondering, why do they call it Atom? Well, speculation, this isn't confirmed of course, but speculation is that the reason it's called Atom is because at the time Apple was probably one of the biggest competitors, and Atom, as in Adam and Eve, took a bite of the apple. So there's kind of a play on words, kind of a smart jab at Apple by Coleco. But let's take unboxing. Let's unbox both of these, show what's included, talk more about the system itself, and then later on in the video I'm going to show you some gameplay comparisons. This thing's got a lot more memory, it's a lot more powerful than the Coleco. So for example, this has got 80 kilobytes of RAM memory, which I know in today's standards is really nothing. The games, there's a lot of games that were compatible. I believe there was like 19 games that were released for both formats. The add-in ports were significantly better. For example, Donkey Kong, when that came out, they had the 4th Pi level stage in it. They had the cutscenes. The graphics were a little bit better. The sound is better. And then, there's like Buck Rogers, which was the packing game for the computer, was different than the Buck Rogers cassette tape. I'll show you comparisons of that later in the video. Yeah, so it's a lot more powerful than the ColecoVision, and it's a pretty cool system. Now, there's some faults, so let's take a closer look. Thanks for watching. Here's a closer look at the console itself, the actual computer console. This is where the cassette tapes would actually plug into. You actually put them in here. Now, I'm not referring to audio cassette tapes, although they look very similar. These are actually used for storage, data storage. So at the time, cartridges, for example, could store up to 32 kilobytes of RAM, where these cassette tapes could store up to 256 kilobytes of RAM. So you could store more data, make the games pretty much better sounding, better with graphics, etc. Okay? One problem with this thing, a huge issue, was if the cassette tape was actually left in there and you powered on the system and the cassette tape was on there, the electrical charge could delete, and oftentimes did delete all the data on that cassette tape. So even though the instruction manuals tell you to leave the cassette tapes in there, that's not the case. So that was a huge downfall. You can imagine how upset people were when they found out that all the data was deleted because they powered on the system with the cassette tape on it. That's a huge, huge issue, okay? And in fact, at one point, rumors had it that 5 out of 6 of the initial shipment of Atom computers were defective. So, we look back on the original Xbox 360 and how many issues that had when it first launched. Imagine 5 and 6, that's just an amazingly high number of defective units, okay? Here is the computer switch. You can reset it right here. This is your cartridge. You can turn on the cartridge, switch the cartridge. This is where actually the cartridge slot would go, okay? Notice a nice rainbow logo. Atari liked to do the same thing back in the day, have the rainbow logo. It's definitely 80s. So here's the back. This is actually where you hook up to your printer. You hook up to your TV, as well as your monitor. You can use either. And this is your channel select, so you can choose between channel 3 or 4. Notice there is no power button or anything like that. That's actually on. The on-off switch is actually on the printer itself, which is another issue. So if the printer stopped working, or if you don't have the printer, you cannot use the system, which is a huge, huge issue. Here's another expansion port right here. Expansion module, okay? And then this is where the controllers will actually plug into on the side. Coleco did initially release a floppy disk. Now, floppies at the time before the Atom came out were kind of expensive to produce. By the time it came out, though, in 1983, the price of the floppies dropped down significantly. You can store more data on this floppy than you can even a cassette tape. So this was sold separately, and this would just add on. This is your power switch. Kind of looks very similar to the Commodore 64 floppy drive. Other items that were included in this box are 2 controllers. These are identical to the ColecoVision controllers. However, these are kind of off-white opposed to black. You have your power buttons here. You have your knob. I think a lot of people complain about the ColecoVision controllers, how the joystick is kind of weird. I agree with that statement. They're kind of off. Here's the keyboard, pretty standard keyboard, and a lot of people praise the keyboard. Actually, handles pretty well. It does come with some cassette tapes. This is Buck Rogers. Let me open this up and show you what the games actually look like. This is what it actually looks like, okay? There are about 20 exclusive games that were released for the Atom that weren't released for the ColecoVision, and there were about 5 floppy games that came out for the floppy drive. This is Smart Basic. You need to plug this in for the basic programming. And it also comes with high-speed data pack. This is a blank one, pre-formatted. Okay, so you can program your own. Here's a link cable. Okay, and this would attach on the side. This is for your controller. You can hook up a controller. And these are just some standard cables. Let me show you the printer now. Okay, before I show you the printer, I want to show you the manuals this thing came with. This thing is just a novel of a manual, and that's one issue that Atom said they had was it confused people. And that's what the issues they said why it didn't sell very much, is the manuals weren't very clear on what to do and how it worked. So they actually reprinted the manuals, redid the manuals. And for those who are wondering what this cable was I showed you earlier, this is actually to hook up. You can hook this up to a floppy disk, and this extension goes into the console itself, okay? So here's a printer, and this thing is a beast. This actually hooks up to the extra console, okay? This is the power switch is actually on this thing, as I mentioned before, which is a huge issue. And this is it. So this is what they call a daisy wheel printer. So meaning there's a wheel in there. You print 10 letters a second. So it's pretty slow compared to a dot matrix printer. And it's pretty loud compared to a dot matrix printer. So little higher quality, I guess, is definitely letter quality, so it's a plus. They loved, reporters and reviewers liked the quality of the printer. However, again, the fact that the power switch, actually on the back, let me show you, it's actually right here. That just doesn't make any sense at all, why they would just put it there. So, all right, now let's take a closer look at the Atom Expansion Module 3. So for the most part, what's included in this box is for the most part pretty much the same as the box I just showed you. So I'm just gonna briefly show you this, just the differences. This is kind of comes with like a base here, okay? So you can just use for the base. All right, I think that's for the printer. Keyboard's the same, cassettes and stuff are all the same. Let's open this up. And let me show you what the console looks like. And I also want to say a big thank you to my friend Stu. Thank you, Stu. He actually gave me this for my birthday recently, and that was super nice of him and unbelievable. I was not expecting that. So thank you, Stu, for this. And I want to do a review for Stu and for you guys, of course, because Stu is a big fan of the Coleco like I am. We love the ColecoVision. So let's open this up. So here is the console itself. You can see it's slightly shorter than the version I showed you before. It has an attachment here that actually hooks up to the ColecoVision, as shown in this picture right here, if you can see that. But there's no controllers in this. I guess I assume that you already have the controllers for the ColecoVision. You don't need the controllers, but see my idea, the cassette tapes plug in there, okay? And it says Expansion Module 3 right here. This is the hookup for a keyboard, okay? This is where you would actually plug in for AtomNet, okay? Some type of online for them at the time. And there's an expansion port here as well, okay? So let's plug this in and see how this actually boots up. First thing I want to show you is the typewriter. Still works over 30 years later. You're going to notice some white noise. That just has to do with the RF connection. It's just a 30-year-old system. You just have to deal with it, unfortunately. And there is no delete. So unlike today, we can just delete if you messed up. You have to use whiteout back in the day. So we were very spoiled when it comes to word processing today, but there you go. It still works 30 years later. I wanted to compare both the Buck Rogers Planet of Zoom gameplay between the Atom and the ColecoVision. Notice the static. I apologize, that's the RF connection. It's just old, it's 30 years old, so don't mind the static. But you'll notice some subtle differences with the graphics, the sound, the explosions when you blow up. There's more enemies in the Atom version. Let's take a closer look. So in conclusion regarding the Coleco Atom computer, well, there's certainly some positives for it, for sure, right? So you can play, as noted before, you can play ColecoVision games, compatible, it's backwards compatible in that sense. It's an all-encompassing computer, so out of the box, you can pretty much plug in and have all the accessories you need outside of the floppy disk that was later released. But that's really where the positives end for the system. It's really big and bulky. I didn't mention this before, but the system, the boxes weigh close to 50 pounds. In fact, I was lifting a box and I nearly threw my back out doing it because it's so freaking heavy and awkward because it's so freaking large. So you can imagine retailer stores, not shelving many of these at the stores because they take up so much space and they're really expensive to ship, right? But as far as the negativities, I mean, why in the world would they put a power switch on the printer? Why would they not check to make sure that when you power on the system that it doesn't delete any data from any of the cassettes? That's a huge issue. And the price tag certainly was a big pill to swallow back then. So at the end of the day, it didn't do very well. Unfortunately, it drained Coleco of most of its money, if not all of its money. They filed bankruptcy. And it's really sad because the ColecoVision was such a great system. And this is a follow-up and didn't do very well at all. So I'm kind of curious what your guys' thoughts are. If you guys like this video, I really appreciate you guys liking this video. That's great. Please leave a comment below, and we'll see you guys soon. Take care, and game on. Also, please subscribe. That means a lot. And if you want to stay in contact, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I also have a website, Gamester81.com, and I have t-shirts available that help support the show as well. And those are available at chopshopgoods.com.